Bring in a couple of people who have been following this speech by President Obama and the one before by Joe Biden. In Houston, in Texas, we can speak to the blogger Melissa Clothier, and in Chicago, PR executive John Moore joins us live. Both of you, thank you very much for joining us. Melissa, what did you make of that?
Well, part of me thinks that this is a lot of political theater. Harry Reid has made clear that no gun legislation is going to get through, and that's in the Democrat held Senate, where a lot of senators are up for re-election in states that very much value their guns. So part of me feels, and looking through all of the different executive actions, I've just had a chance to look through them, it's kind of weak sauce, actually. And so I don't know what he's exactly trying to do here, because politically getting the legislation through is going to be difficult, if not impossible.
Melissa, leave the practicalities to one side and just talk to me about how you feel. Do you want politicians in Washington to accept these gun reforms?
No, of course I don't. I mean, this is the laws that he's talking about passing, even the executive actions, wouldn't have prevented Sandy Hook, for example. The guns that were used were stolen first before they were used. And so the guy who took the guns to a school took them from his mother first and killed her first. A mental health background check wouldn't have stopped Sandy Hook, because the person who committed the crimes wasn't using his own guns. And that's the same case for Columbine, for example. And so I find these reforms impractical and not really useful.
And it's worth adding, isn't it, that Joe Biden talked about there being a moral obligation to act. All sides of this argument are saying, yes, let's act. It's how America should act that's being discussed. John, what about you? What did you make of President Obama's speech?
Well, I was pleased by it. I mean, the argument that nothing can be done, you can't stop Sandy Hook, that's not really relevant here. You have to take some steps. If some of these actions were in place, let's say smaller magazines, Sandy Hook may have still happened, but instead of losing 20 children, we may have only lost 10. The gun rights activists, they always want to talk about what doesn't work. They never want to talk about what will work. So it's really important to go ahead and take steps. Every little step counts, and not just on the gun side, but working on mental health, working on education, working on economic development. Here in Chicago, we have a very high amount of gun crimes. Anything that we can do to stem the tide and, reduce gun deaths, I think we should really, put forth.
And Melissa, if you're not convinced by what President Obama and Joe Biden have come up with today, what would you do to prevent something like Sandy Hook happening again?
Well, first, I'd just like to address your other guest's comment about magazines. Clearly, most people in the media just don't understand how quickly a magazine can be taken out and put back in. At less than 2 seconds, not even, if somebody is good at handling a gun. So it's a solution in search of a problem in some ways. And in Chicago in particular, you have the highest, most restrictive gun laws, and you have the highest murder rate in the United States. And so to do something but to achieve nothing is ridiculous. So what can be done? I would suggest that more freedom to bear arms. Allow our teachers to be trained to prevent. Not every teacher is going to want to be, carry a firearm. Not every principal will want to, but allow people to defend themselves.
You're quite right. I was on BBC World Service Radio just a few days ago, and we were talking about whether teachers should be armed. And actually, it was teachers in Texas more than any other state who were willing to do that. Many other people had reservations about that. John, let's just talk about the tone of President Obama's speech. He quoted Ronald Reagan. He quoted letters he's received from children. He became very emotional at the end. Was that an appropriate tone to take when he's trying to persuade Congress to send these new laws through?
He's trying to save American lives, yes. We lost 3,000 people on September 11th, and we've gone ahead and given up a lot of freedoms as a result of it. We lose 10,000 people a year due to gun deaths, yet the far right, the gun control, they don't want to, the gun lobby doesn't want to do anything about it. So the tone that the president had, and it's very important that he brings up Reagan, because don't forget his enemies, his opponents that like to criticize him for anything he does. They worship at the altar of Ronald Reagan. So if he goes ahead and he uses Reagan's voice and talks about what Reagan does, and they're still not going to work with him, what does that tell you? These people do not care about the innocent lives that are being taken. They talk about arming everybody. Remember when Gabby Gilbert got shot? She was taken down. Her shooter was taken down by folks who were carrying, but they did not pull a gun on her because they couldn't react.
And that's the heart of the debate, isn't it? Whether you're armed or not, what would you do in a situation of great pressure? The BBC's Mark Mardell, our North America editor, has just tweeted, "This sounds like a campaign speech from Obama." It is. Conviction politicians campaign to win elections so they can make change happen. Nick Kristof of the New York Times has also tweeted his approval of the speech. And Melissa, I know because I've spoken to you a little while ago about guns, that you own guns yourself. Do you think President Obama's speech might make you reconsider your relationship with your weapons?
No. I mean, this last 2 weeks alone, a boy here in Houston protected his younger sister from armed intruders with his AR-15, his parents' AR-15. I want people to be able to protect themselves. And another woman protected her children from an armed intruder who kept coming into the house further and further. She was trying to hide and protect her twins, and she shot the man six times. She was out of bullets.
Melissa, I'm going to jump in here just because we're coming up to the end of this half hour on the BBC. Thank you to you for joining us. John, thanks to you as well. Well, we're going to carry on hearing reaction to President Obama's speech on gun reform in America here on BBC World News. You can get full coverage at bbc.com/news as well. But for the moment, thanks for joining me. Goodbye.